Pueden sentarse, por favor. Esta mañana yo necesito que ustedes tienen una comprensión muy profunda de este evangelio. Porque en este momento, para Jesucristo y sus discípulos, hace 2000 años, y para nosotros, sus discípulos hoy, hay muros que nos separan. ¿Te sientes separado en este momento? ¿Están en la oscuridad? ¿Entiendes las buenas noticias en español o solamente en inglés? La idioma puede ser su muro, un muro que nos mantiene separados. So what just happened to you in the last few moments when I began my sermon in Spanish? Did you feel included or excluded? Did you feel frustrated or curious? This morning, I need to ask all of us to embrace a profound understanding of the gospel lesson that we just heard, because we are living in a time where there is profound blessing and also profound woes. And language is one way in which we can be separated from one another. Language can create a wall between us and them. And when we don't understand, or we move into a community where the language we learned in our household from our mother tongue, is not the language of the community, that experience can be profoundly isolating. It can be like a wall erected between us and the community that we need to connect with. So sharing a little bit of Spanish with you this morning did not come to me because I went to school to learn it, although I did take classes at Notre Dame in order to improve my verb usage, but I still stink at that. I learned at the feet of the community at St. Mark's on the Hill, where we led a Spanish language service for 8 years while I was there. And in the beginning, I sounded ridiculous, horrible, Spanglish, like worse than the 2-year-olds in the community. And these Salvadorans and Hondurans and Guatemalans all looked at me with such patience and kindness and gentleness, and they said, "It's okay. We need to have this wedding, this quinceañera, this mass in Spanish, and you will have to do." So 8 years later, I still stumble around, maybe second grader in Spanish. My vocabulary limited, my understanding compromised, and what I learned every time I gathered with that gracious and wonderful community was how exhausting every day was for them. 3 hours of having to live in a Spanish-only environment, providing them with an oasis where they could relax, say the prayers the way La Abuela taught them, was for me 3 hours of working really hard to stay present, to understand what was going on, to not erect a wall and keep myself separate and safe and isolated, to continue to enter into situations where I was ignorant and asking a lot of questions, and usually turning to the kids and saying, una problema, no entiende. ¿Qué es la palabra? ¿Cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se dice was what I said all the time. How do you say this? So that experience taught me at their feet a little bit about their life experience every day, 24/7, in an environment where, in order to survive, they have to climb over all kinds of linguistic barriers, cultural walls, and difficulties to participate in our common life, things that we take for granted. When we live in this country, we experience profound blessing. And Jesus is standing on the plain, on a level place in Luke's gospel this morning, gathered with all of humanity, recognizing that all of us, whether it was 2,000 years ago or today, if we have a choice, we would choose blessing. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? In our humanity, the things that are difficult, the things that make our lives hard and small and exhausting, and the ways in which we struggle are never anything that we would choose. Usually we say, oh, I'm feeling cursed. Maybe it's just for a day, maybe a week. Maybe you have experienced a curse for a couple months, years, maybe even a lifetime. And when we find ourselves in that place of cursedness, we'll do anything to experience some relief and find some blessing. In the moment when Jesus gathers with all of his friends on the plain, those 12 disciples who have been following him, he's joined by a crowd of people. They come from Jerusalem and all of Judea and Tyre and Sidon. And what Luke wants us to imagine is this huge crowd of people from everywhere, the coastlands to the mountains to the river. They've all come together to gather around Jesus. And the reason that they are there is not because their lives are blessed. In fact, the 12 disciples, I imagine, are feeling pretty smug. They're kind of like the cool kids in the lunch. They've got the table with the rabbi. They're the ones who are waiting for the reign of God to come and overthrow those Romans, and we're going to have the seats of power because we're closest to Jesus, and everybody wants to be near him, and we get to spend all this time with him, and they're feeling really blessed. And they're looking around the plain at all of these needy, broken, impoverished, hungry, sick, possessed, difficult people. And I imagine that they are beginning to think, ooh, Jesus, could we choose some better company? Are these our people? You don't think this stuff is contagious, do you? Can you catch that? I really don't want my life to look like theirs. We do it. It's human nature. We make a little standoff distance between ourselves and those whose lives we really hope ours don't become like. When we encounter someone and we have an experience of their poverty, their hunger, we have an experience of the ways in which they are in desperate need, sometimes it makes us very uncomfortable. We're unsure how to enter in. And even worse, if we're feeling a little anxious that maybe our blessings might be in jeopardy, we build a wall. I really don't want those curses to come over here. And so I'm going to erect a barrier. In order to keep that cursed stuff out here, keep blessings over here, I can secure my own salvation, and then Jesus on the plain turns everything upside down. And he says, "Blessed are the poor, and woe to you who are rich." Jesus turns on its head our very human nature and inclination to lean towards those things that in this world we view as our salvation, our blessing, our gift. All the blessings that have been showered upon us, whether that's wealth or our needs being met, whether that's people speaking well of us, whether that's finding a seat at the table always available to us. When those things come to us, we say, yes, this is blessing. And Jesus says to us, woe to you, because you have erected a barrier between yourself and those who are in need. Come with me to a level place where there are no walls. Come with me to a table where there is no up or down, but everyone is seated and fed. And he starts with poverty. Blessed are the poor. Poverty is one of those experiences that can make our lives very small and difficult and hard, can diminish our relationships in community, and if we have never experienced poverty, we can maybe not say it out loud, but secretly think in the back of our heads that somehow, well, if you just worked a little harder, maybe if you'd gone to school, maybe if you'd done a few things, there's probably some reason why poverty has been visited upon you. We make a little standoff distance. We don't see poverty as roll of the dice, luck of the draw, part of life that could just as easily be visited upon me as the next person. We don't see poverty in our own systemic problem in the United States as more visited upon those in minorities than those who are in the majority of being white. In our own country, poverty is often a place where walls get built and we don't see the wall that has been erected, but we can feel it. I ask you one of these days to walk from Church Street over to South Street. Tell me when you cross the wall. Tell me when you walk from the place where you feel comfortable to the place where you feel uncomfortable. And then I ask you, where is Jesus standing? On which side of the wall? Where in our community would we go to find him on that level ground where all Jerusalem, Judea, Tyre, and Sidon, all the people who are suffering and who need help can gather around him? Is it at the Community Action Agency? Or is it on Market Street in the midst of the restaurants? Where is Jesus standing in our community? Poverty is a very real issue in Frederick. And if you look at the government markers for poverty, you might think, oh, that's just a small minority of our county. But the truth is, you have to look a little deeper. What our government says is poverty is poverty, but it's pretty significant. There's a new report that's been coming out over the last few years from the United Way called the Alice Report. They're trying to identify who are the people who are asset limited, meaning they don't have a lot of assets, they don't own property, they don't have resources to draw on should life get tough. They have a limited income because there's only so many jobs available to them, whether that's due to education or location or transportation, whatever it is that limits your ability to be employed. And they are employed. They are not unemployed. According to the Alice Report, where they look at how much it costs to live in Frederick County, we have a high rate of poverty. In the Alice Report, 39% of all people in Frederick County fall in the poverty zone. 39%. So if we thought that that community was a small group, we're wrong. If we thought that that was other people, we're wrong. And in fact, there are people here in our own community of All Saints who would fall into that poverty section of 39%. Is there a wall between us and them? Or are we building those relationships that recognize blessing, that build on the reign of God? If you look at Frederick City, it gets even worse. If you thought poverty was the minority, you're wrong. 51% of Frederick City is in poverty, according to the Alice Report. If you're white, that's only 35% of you, but if you're black, it's 58%. If you're Latino, it's 57%, Asian 45%, and mixed race 47%. And if you're under 25 years of age and you do not live at home, 85% of you are living in poverty. Those demographics caused me to realize that we are not adequately in relationship with those in poverty in our community. They're hidden, or the ways in which we encounter them hide their poverty from us, and that we are unable to do the blessing work of being in relationship. And in my own affluence, my own privilege, my own standoff distance, woe to me. I am cursed. I am not aware of how the reign of God is breaking in. I can't find Jesus because I can't encounter the people who he is gathering with and sharing his power with. I have to figure out how to be in relationship with those in need. That is part of our work. But he doesn't stop there. Jesus keeps talking. He says, what about the hungry? They're blessed. What about the weeping? They're blessed. The hated, the excluded, they're blessed. And you have to ask yourself, who would sign up for that life of being hungry, weeping, hated, and excluded? Nobody signs up for that life. But it gets visited upon them, and then what do? So the people of Honduras and El Salvador live in countries where violence is worse than any other place on the planet, not in active war combat. So if you live in those Central American countries, you have a really high chance of being killed. Homicide rate in 2015 in El Salvador was 103 people for every 100,000 were killed. And that was not because there was an open civil war or some kind of conflict. That was because the country was so unstable, and gangs, narcotics trafficking, a weak rule of law, and internal corruption made it an unsafe place to live. So if you happen to be born there and your parents wanted a better life for you, you might start walking. You might come north. You might find yourself at a border, hungry, weeping, hated, excluded, and wondering where you can live. Wondering if you will be blessed or cursed. And when we are swallowing all of this political rhetoric, all of this language about how there are a people coming as an invasion, we have designated them cursed, other, and we erect a wall to keep them out. Jesus challenges all of that every day, and especially in this gospel, by asking us to see them as blessed and recognize the ways in which we are mounting our own woes. When we erect that wall, we imprison both ourselves and the ones who have come to Christ in need. You might think, well, what's wrong with those countries? Why can't they get it together? The truth of the matter is we are responsible for much of their economic fragility and the difficulties that they experience. We're the ones who are able to afford all the narcotics. We're the ones who are able to promote a drug trade that is, for some people, the only way to be employed, to make their lives better. And the criminal behavior and the violence that comes along with it, and the gang warfare and the instability of their government is directly related to our interference in Central America and our inability to support their governments in a way that would build them up and not take advantage. Over the years, whether by intention or just accident, the wealth of the United States has consistently been built on the backs of these countries. And so we create an environment that people are fleeing from, not directly, not saying that each and every one of us has done that, but our participation in the blessings of this country has created curses for others. And so how do we respond? How do we recognize in the sea of humanity that Jesus is standing in the midst of them and saying, "Blessed are you. Your life is valuable. You are precious. You inherit the kingdom of God, and you have a place at the table." How do we recognize our own woes, our own affluence, our own, imprisonment an inability to be in relationship with those in need? What are the things that get in our way? What are the barriers that we need to learn how to travel across? What are the walls that we have erected? Is it language? Is it location? Is it the ability to reach out and begin a relationship with someone who makes us a little bit anxious? In our own school of Lincoln Elementary, where we go and pack bags for blessings in a backpack each week, we serve about 400 students every weekend with food. When I looked at the statistics at Lincoln, 29% of the children at Lincoln are Latino Hispanic, 31% are African American, and 62% receive free and reduced meals, meaning that they fall into a poverty line where their food needs to be subsidized. And 21% have English as a second language. This school is in our backyard. We're already there, packing food every week. Do we know where our blessings lie? Do we know our woes of not knowing and understanding those students or their families? We have an opportunity to sit at their feet and to learn, to discover in their presence what their lives are like and the blessing that they bring. We also have an opportunity to try to take down the walls that separate us, to maybe learn a little Spanish, to maybe learn what it's like to live a life that's not our own, to discover what it means to bring laughter, to bring wholeness, to bring food, to bring peace and healing, and to hear the stories of what people have endured in order to leave one place and to find blessing in another. Because right now, with all of the talk and the rhetoric and the negativity and the focus on how someone else is visiting curses upon us, in all of those lies, we are unable to create a safe space for people who have immigrated to this country to live. We are unable to be in relationship with them because they live in fear. The teachers at Lincoln talk about parents not attending parent-teacher conferences because they're afraid of being deported, of being picked up. And there's also high rates of homelessness amongst that community that attends at Lincoln. We have work to do. We have relationships to build. We have walls to cross. We have walls to break down. And we have to constantly be aware in ourselves, where are we consciously or unconsciously constructing a wall, a barrier, a separation, a standoff distance? Where are we backing up because we think, ooh, that curse might be contagious? That makes me really uncomfortable. I don't know how to lean in there. Where are the ways in which we are challenged to draw together on the plane with Jesus and discover that the whole body of Christ is being made present? And then lean into that space. Discover the blessing it has to offer us. This past week, I had an opportunity to have a conversation with Pastor Mark Groover over at Asbury Methodist. We were talking about some opportunities to partner during Lent, and he was sharing with me a piece of property that is right next to the church building, right across All Saints Street, right where Court turns into Ice. That little building there has been, in some ways, a significant burden for Asbury. They don't have the money to do all of the work to fix it up and make it usable, but it's in a historic district. They can't just level it and tear it down. And so all of these years, thousands of dollars have gone in for property taxes and for insurance. And every year it's a financial drain, and there's no ministry and no benefit for the community there. And so Pastor Mark and the community began a conversation. We need to sell it. We need to get it off our books. We need to release this piece of property. What are we going to do? And guess who showed up on their doorstep? Well, do you know how expensive and hot downtown property is, especially when it's a block away from Market Street? Developers were on the doorstep immediately. Do you know what we could build here? Do you know how much rent we could get here? We could put townhouses, condos, apartments. We could get X number of dollars. And pretty soon, Pastor Mark said, I could see a wall between me and my neighbors. He didn't use that language, but that's exactly what he was imagining. I'm going to sell this piece of property to the highest bidder, and I will lose relationship with anyone who lives there, because none of my people could afford to live there. And when I do that, when I sell for wealth, for riches, for blessings, what I'm going to get in exchange is a community of people that are not my people. I'm not willing to make the trade. They sold the property to Habitat for Humanity. And they are working with Habitat to build affordable housing there. And he laughed and said to me, it's one way to grow the church. I'm going to move parishioners in next door. This is our challenge. When we're confronted with something that might look like a blessing or look like a curse, we have to dig deeper. We have to recognize the relationships that we are investing in and the relationships that we are rejecting. We have to choose the way that is going to bring us into that blessed space where Christ is present with all people, and we have to examine all the walls that we build, that we think are going to keep us safe, and in fact, they do so much damage, not only to our own lives, but to those who we force to live on the other side. So as we journey together, we have some work to do, and we have some beginnings, some first steps, some relationships that we've begun, some ways that we can encounter each other and build relationships that will make us a more complete body of Christ. But we have to get on the plane with Jesus, not the kind that flies overhead, but the kind where everyone has a level footing, where we can meet one another, where we can tear down the walls that separate us, where we can address the true state of emergency that we're in, which is that we are isolated, we suffer from affluence, and we think that we're going to save ourselves, and it's a lie. Only Christ will save us, and blessed are those who are coming to our doorstep, because they are the ones who will teach us how to really be in relationship with salvation. Amen.